Amid recent escalations and possible Russian war crimes in Ukraine, the EU is trying to rid itself of Russian gas as quickly as possible, also considering that Russia has threatened to stop deliveries. A timeline, however, is unclear. Germany has activated its energy emergency plan in order to be prepared for a possible loss of Russian gas supplies. If this were to happen, alternatives would have to quickly be found. Now, in 2021, Russia supplied the EU with 155 billion cubic meters of gas. So turning up the taps means a big shortfall. The United States has committed to an additional 15 billion cubic meters of gas this year. Supplies could be delivered through Europe through various liquefied natural gas terminals. Algeria has also agreed to supply more gas if needed, increasing its capacity by nearly 3 billion cubic meters a year. Other commitments are squishier. The International Energy Agency estimates that countries like Norway and Azerbaijan could increase their output to the EU over the next year, while other suppliers like Qatar, Canada, and Australia are already bound by long-term supply contracts and cannot easily ramp up production. All right, for a closer look at this, let's bring in Karen Pittel. She's the director of the IFO Center for Energy, Climate and Resources, and she joins me from Munich. Welcome back to the program, Karen. Should the EU decide to boycott Russian gas deliveries, it doesn't look like the alternative sources can fill the gap, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, that's basically unanimous from all of the sources that you see trying to estimate how much is possible, that there is only a minor increase possible with respect to pipeline deliveries and a little bit larger, but also very uncertain increase in the deliveries by LNG.
So of the 155 billion cubic meters that we saw last year, how big a gap would remain if Europe were to tap all the sources available?
I mean, basically, estimates range from 10 to 15 billion cubic meters that could be added through pipelines and about 20 to 60 via LNG. So there's a high range of uncertainty, and we could face something as low as like 30 billion. So that would make up about 20% that could be made up of the imports from Russia, up to something like 75, which would then amount to almost 45–50%. But it's a high range of uncertainty, and what we need to do is not only get gas from other sources, but also reduce demand and reduce usage of gas.
Germany is a heavily industrialized economy, obviously, and the gap that you're talking about, what would this gap mean if we translated into loss of GDP?
There's been a number of studies done on exactly that questions, and estimates usually range in the short run between -3%, -6% of the previous estimates of GDP development. So it's a lot, but it's not unbearable. Now, of course, there's a lot of discussion about that, because especially in the very short run, how fast can you actually use substitutes? How fast could you use for imports for certain things? How fast can you do energy efficiency increases? So all of this is rather uncertain, and the government is basically frantically trying to hash out what is possible and what is not.
And all of this takes time, of course. We know that, for example, the terminals to receive liquefied natural gas in Germany are still under construction. That's certainly something that cannot done from today until tomorrow. Karen, tell us, how long will it take for Germany and the EU to be completely independent from Russian gas, should the bloc decide wanting to do that?
I mean, that not only depends on the EU, but also to a large extent on the development of LNG shipping capacities from outside of Europe. There is a small potential of increasing gas production in Europe that has declined substantially over the last decade, basically. But the development of ports to ship LNG from is as important as the development of the ports to actually receive LNG. And of course, Germany doesn't have own terminals so far, but there is construction going on of other terminals in other EU countries. And in a network like it is in the EU, there's of course also the possibility for Germany to get liquefied gas through other ports.
Karen Patel, Director of the IFO Center for Energy, Climate and Resources. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Western countries want to become independent of Russian energy supplies. That's the idea. But what are the alternatives? Now, Russian hard coal could be replaced by coal from Indonesia. While more demand for the country's industry is certainly welcome, Indonesia's government does have its own concerns.
At the beginning of the year, the Indonesian government cracked down, imposing an export ban on coal. But the ban was only in force until the end of January. Now coal ships are allowed to head for international ports again, as long as domestic supply is assured. A quarter of the production must remain in Indonesia, sold at prices set by the government. Exported coal, on the other hand, will reap a bonanza for the coal companies, thanks to the sharp rise in prices on the world market. Fueled by the Russian war of aggression in Ukraine, the price of a ton of coal recently climbed to over $400. But coal-rich Indonesia is also focusing on renewable energies for the long run and wants to be carbon neutral by 2060.
Indonesia, as a tropical country, we are having a lot of sources of solar. And also, beside that, we have also wind. And then there are also marine energy source. We, beside those technology, we also expect the rapid development of the energy storage system.
At the moment, however, climate-damaging coal is the country's most important energy source. For this year, the government expects production to grow by 8%.
Well, for more on this, let's cross over to Jakarta and journalist Nadine Freischladt. Nadine, how much is Indonesia profiting from coal buyers seeking alternatives to Russia?
I mean, Indonesia has profited from high coal prices for a while now. It started, I believe, before the Ukraine crisis really took off. And I mean, you would think definitely the coal sector had seen its prices soar. But as you mentioned earlier, there's also two forces that are actually countering this effect, which is on one hand, the Indonesian government's attempt to force the coal producing companies to reserve a certain amount of coal for the domestic market. And when you said earlier 25%, there's now talk of raising that to even further to some 30%. So, and then the other dimension in this that actually increases pressure on the Indonesian budget is that as commodities prices rise, the need for subsidies also rises, because it's been important to the Indonesian state to keep certain prices for fuel, for gas, consumer friendly and very low, and that means we'll need to continue subsidizing, which increases the pressure on the state budget.
Nadine, not long ago, this year, actually, Indonesia's leadership issued a temporary export ban on coal. Is there concern that the government could do that again anytime soon?
There's no more talk of an export outright ban. There is talk of increasing the domestic market obligation a little bit further. So I think the balance of those two, the balance of the domestic market obligation is where it's going to be at. I haven't heard anything about a new ban.
Indonesia is the world's biggest exporter of thermal coal, but it is reliant on oil and gas imports. Could it benefit from a possible Western boycott of Russian oil?
I mean, that's the thing. Unlike some Western countries, Indonesia hasn't said that it won't, take advantage of cheaper prices on the market. And I think Pertamina, the state oil company, is making plans to purchase Russian oil at lower costs. Again, because higher prices in Indonesia mean that the government has to pay a lot for subsidies, and so it's purely an economic decision to look for cheaper prices on the market.
Now, despite its heavy entanglement in the commodities business, Indonesia also wants to become carbon neutral by 2060, as we heard in the report, possibly sooner than 2060. How far along is the country on this path?
I would say it's still a long road indeed. What we have heard the ministry say is that a new bill for new and renewable energies is supposed to be passed by the third quarter of this year, which will finally give a little bit more concrete plans for how the energy transition is going to be achieved. What has happened already is that one or two of more utility scale solar systems have begun building. I don't think any of them have actually come online yet. So it's really still very in the early days. And in my views, certain decisions, for example, to actually delay the rollout of the carbon tax again, which was supposed to take effect this month, but they have said, let's postpone it again for another quarter, 3 months or so. Those are all signals that it is still very difficult to implement policies that could hurt the traditional sectors.
Okay. Journalist Nadine Freischlatt reporting from Jakarta. Thank you.